Good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for this wonderful and special and important announcement. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory. The land in which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dakota, the Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I'm, of course, very happy to be with my provincial counterparts. And, of course, it's great to be here with Minister Carr and Member of Parliament and Parliamentary Secretary Terry Duguid. They're the main reason why we're here today. Nous savons que ces 14 mois ont été difficiles. It is an understatement to say that the last 14 months have been challenging for families, and especially for parents with young children. They've had to deal with closures of childcare centers, closures of schools, and as a dad of 3 young boys, I know that what every parent wants to do is to give their kids the best possible start in life. And we know that childcare was already undergoing difficulties even before the pandemic. We continue to experience across the country long wait lists, childcare that does not include every child from every background, childcare that does not meet the needs of Indigenous children. And none of what I'm saying is really news to parents. And when we came into office, our government knew that we had to do more and we had to step up. And since 2017, for example, over the last 4 years, we've invested over $62 million in childcare in the province of Manitoba through our bilateral agreement. But we know that there's absolutely more work to be done. Je pense que je parle pour tout le monde aujourd'hui lorsque je dis que nous avons besoin d'un système de garde d'enfants abordable, accessible, inclusif et de haute qualité au Canada, et nous en avons besoin maintenant. A childcare system that will simply leave no Manitoban child behind, and a childcare system that will be there for our great and valuable early childhood educators. Un système abordable et accessible à tous. I'm talking about making more childcare spaces available for parents who need them. Spaces that you can get before your children are too old to use them. I'm talking about providing early childhood educators with good pay that is reflective of their training and their skills and their dedication, and respecting them and training them and providing them with incentives so that they can, so that more people can choose to not only become early childhood educators, but continue to be early childhood educators. And you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a wake-up call for all of us on the importance of having access to affordable, high-quality, inclusive, and accessible childcare. And now that we're seeing the reopening of our communities with more Canadians being vaccinated, they're having to, parents with children, especially women with children, are having to make the impossible choice of either staying at home to take care of their kids or going back to work and paying very high childcare fees and fighting for those hard to get childcare spaces. How's that a real choice? We got to do better. And that's why in Budget 2021 we've made a historic investment. And we came in with 4 goals: saving families thousands of dollars a year by cutting fees, creating more spaces to make sure that no child in Canada is left behind, ensuring that the spaces we create are high quality, are also through a well-skilled and well-supported workforce, and making sure that the childcare spaces we continue to create in this country are culturally appropriate and relevant to children of all backgrounds, including Indigenous kids. Our plan is big and ambitious, but if we're telling our own kids to dream big, we need to lead by example. So for Manitoba parents with young kids, this dream is about to become reality. So I'm very pleased to join my colleagues here today to announce that we will be signing an agreement right here today with the government of Manitoba, who will officially join our Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. Our government is providing more than $1.2 billion to the province of Manitoba over the next 5 years, which will go to support $10 a day childcare in Manitoba. And they've put a plan to actually get there by 2023. So by 2023, with the support of the federal government through this agreement and the investment of $1.2 billion, Manitoba families will see an average of $10 a day childcare by 2023. This is an absolutely incredible result, and we know how meaningful it will be for parents across this province. Et nous n'avons même pas encore fini. But we're not even done yet. In the next 5 years, with this investment, we will be creating 23,000 new high-quality early learning and childcare spaces in Manitoba to ensure that families, all families of children up to the age of 6 can access childcare spaces that meet their needs. The agreement will also lead to the creation of 1,700 extended hours childcare spaces for families requiring childcare in the evenings and weekends, as well as guaranteed childcare spaces for children whose parents are transitioning into regular employment, because we know that parenting is not a 9-to-5 job. So if you're a parent in Manitoba, this landmark agreement means that help is absolutely on the way. And I got to tell you, with this agreement, almost 50% of Canadian families will now have access soon to childcare that is affordable, accessible, inclusive, and high quality. 50% of families in Canada are now, with this agreement with Manitoba, are now looking at fees cut in half by the end of next year, and $10 a day childcare within 5 years. And in some provinces like Manitoba, much even earlier than that. And we're determined as a government to make sure that the remaining 50% of families also have access to $10 a day childcare fees cut by half by next year, more spaces, more early childhood educators, and more inclusive spaces for every child. We want to make sure that no child in Canada is left behind from coast to coast to coast. So we're working to make the lives of Manitoba families easier and improve the quality of life for all Manitoba families with children as we make sure that their kids get the best possible start in life. That's what this is about. I want to really thank my Manitoba colleagues for making this happen. This is the result of really hard work on both sides, the result of frank conversations, compromises, making sure that we listen to each other, that we learned about the special circumstances of the early learning and childcare sector in Manitoba. And we've always said, as a federal government, we will negotiate in good faith, we will listen to the insight and expertise of the sector, and we've done that in Manitoba. I also want to thank my colleagues, Minister Carr, Member of Parliament Terry Duguid, and Kevin Lamereau, for being such strong champions of early learning and childcare in Manitoba. Minister Carr and Terry Duguid and Kevin, you've all really fought to get us to this point. And I really want to thank you for that. You care deeply about families in Manitoba. And your strong voices, not just for your Manitoba communities, but also for all Canadians. So I want to thank you for your hard work to get us to today. I'm deeply, deeply grateful to our federal officials. A lot of times people don't appreciate the hard work that is happening in the background to get us to this point. And Minister Squires will tell you the same. And our federal officials have really stepped up. They've worked so hard over the weekend, evenings. We've called on them to do more, and they have, more than we ever thought possible. And I really want to thank my Deputy Minister, Graham Flack, Annette Gibbons, Catherine Adam, Karen Hall, Alexander Evans, Christian Paradis, Julie Fontaine, Annie Landry, and Elizabeth Kasuga. Thank you so much for your hard work to get us to this point where we can announce a hugely important agreement on early learning and childcare for Manitoba families. And on that note, I also want to thank Minister Squires for being a strong partner and really working hand in hand with me and our teams to get us to this point. Minister, you've been a pleasure to work with, and I want to welcome you to the podium. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. It's such a pleasure to be hosting you here in Manitoba today. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague and MLA for the area, Minister Scott Fielding, as well as my colleague in South Winnipeg, MP Terry Duguid, and my friend, Minister Carr. And in addition to bringing this wonderful announcement, I want to thank Minister Hussen for also bringing Manitoba this much-needed rain. We always say that the federal government is in charge of weather, and he delivered. Before I begin, I would like to recognize that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Je tiens à profiter de l'occasion pour reconnaître que nous sommes sur le territoire du traité numéro 1 et sur la terre ancestrale du people Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, et Dene et de la nation Métis. I would also like to thank the YMCA-YWCA for hosting us this morning at their wonderful center here on Portage Avenue. Today is a great day for the province of Manitoba. Our government has always been committed to ensuring that families in Manitoba have access to quality, affordable, and inclusive early learning and childcare services. We know that many low and middle-income Manitobans need additional support so they can access safe, high-quality early learning and childcare spaces so that they can fully participate in our growing economy. This is particularly important as we continue to recover from the unfortunate and devastating impacts of COVID-19, a pandemic which has disproportionately impacted women and female employers in our province. We need to fix that. So today, I'm pleased to confirm that families in Manitoba will soon benefit from more than $1.2 billion over 5 years through this historic Canada-Manitoba, Canada-wide early learning and childcare agreement. Je tiens très heureuse de confirmer que les familles du Manitoba bénéficieront bientôt de plus de 1,2 milliard de dollars sur une période de 5 ans dans le cadre historique d'accord Canada-Manitoba sur l'apprentissage et la garde des jeunes enfants. It is no exaggeration to say that this is the largest childcare deal ever struck by the province of Manitoba in its nearly 151-year history. Absolutely. That deserves a round of applause. And I am thrilled to be able to make this joint announcement on behalf of the Government of Manitoba today. I know that many families and childcare providers have been anxiously awaiting this news about Manitoba's participation in the federal government's plan to build a community-based system of quality early learning and childcare. I can assure you that our government has been working diligently to make this deal a reality. I am pleased that we were able to negotiate an agreement with the federal government that recognizes the realities of working families here in Manitoba. This is a good news deal for kids, and it is good news for the early learning childcare educators and providers, and it will be a critical piece in our economic recovery from the pandemic, in particular, helping support more women than ever get back to work. It's an exciting day for us all. Under this agreement, our government will work with the Government of Canada to improve access to quality, affordable, and inclusive early learning and childcare programs and services. As part of that, Manitoba has committed to our shared goal of an average of $10 per day parent fee for children aged 6 and under by the end of the 22-23 fiscal year. Manitoba already has the second lowest parent fees in the country, so we anticipate the potential of being the first province to reach this $10 per day average. In addition to this agreement will support increasing the number of regulated childcare spaces by 23,000 for 6 and under children by 2026. De plus, cette entente soutiendra l'augmentation du nombre de places en garderie réglementée de 23 000 pour les enfants de moins de 6 ans avant 2026. That many new spaces in that time frame has never been done before in the province. It will take significant capital funding as well as new operating dollars, but we are committed to making history through this new deal. It is the right thing to do for our children, it is the right thing to do for Manitoba families, and this agreement provides the flexibility that for Manitoba to build these spaces in the areas of highest need with community partners who will build on the strong history of high-quality ELCC services in the province. While this agreement is for 5 years, I have already raised with Minister Hussen the prospect of making it a 10-year deal. As we implement this agreement, let's start looking ahead on what's possible after 2026, whether it be the potential for a 10-year agreement or confirmation of ongoing funding. We know that after 5 years, there will still be more work to do. We will all need to work together to keep this momentum going. Our government is committed to the long-term sustainable growth in childcare, and that is my pledge to you today. In 2019, our government announced a review of Manitoba's early learning and childcare system, which focused on modernizing and supporting the childcare sector to ensure it meets its diverse needs of Manitoba families, including flexible and expanded childcare options. And earlier this year, we introduced Bill 47, the Early Learning and Childcare Act, which provides the foundation for the modernization of early learning and childcare by removing barriers, providing more flexibility, and continuing to ensure high standards for licensed services. These steps and other actions taken by our government have enhanced the system here in our province. Now we are well positioned to meet the new goals of this Manitoba Canada Childcare Plan. Manitoba's priority area investments for the investments announced today include improved affordability for working families, increasing access, and supporting quality and inclusive care provided by our childcare operators. As part of that, we are committed to building on services that support children with additional needs and ensuring that families have increased access to integrated and culturally responsive curriculum framework that promotes inclusive early learning and childcare programming for children aged 6 and under in Indigenous and other underserved communities. This includes funding to support the workforce by reinforcing certification, increasing wages and salaries, and providing support for facilities to make business management improvements to flexible programming. We know that recruitment and retention in this sector is a challenge. Throughout my time as Minister of Families, I have heard that loud and clear. Our federal partners have offered us separate one-time funding for workforce recruitment and retention, and I look forward to beginning those negotiations shortly. Today's announcements will enhance the stability of the ELC sector and sets the stage for new enhanced wages to be increased as we move forward. As we celebrate this historic investment, I want to acknowledge the work of my child care parent advisory committees and the Minister's consultation table, as well as many other stakeholders and advisors who continue to guide the modernization of early learning and childcare in our province. I too want to thank my officials, starting with my Deputy Minister, Catherine Girard, and my officials, including Michelle Stephen-Weens and Carolyn Ryan, for all the work, the tireless work, and the weekend work that they did with Minister Hussen's officials to make sure that this deal happens. Before I conclude, I would like to add a note about our collective experience over the past year and a half with COVID-19. As a province, we have had to pivot to address larger implications of the pandemic and the ways it has affected employment, education, and childcare needs of families. Throughout all of this, our focus has been on providing stability to the sector as well as additional targeted supports. That is why we provided $4.4 million in the COVID block grant, over $1.9 million in parent fees to centres during the third wave lockdown, and the pandemic staffing support grant. As a woman, as a mother, and someone who experienced firsthand the need for our social safety net, I am honoured to be the Minister of Families who helped bring this deal to our province. And I'm particularly mindful of one overriding fact. More women in the workforce is essential for Manitoba to grow and prosper. We need a stronger childcare system to support and encourage women to join the workforce and contribute their knowledge, skills, and talent. We needed this before COVID, and COVID has made this even more essential. I want to say thanks to all the early learning and childcare providers in the province of Manitoba. You have continued to deliver responsive services for thousands of Manitoba families, including members of my own family, namely my 2 grandsons, under extremely challenging and unpredictable circumstances. And again, I want to thank my colleague, Minister Hussen, and the Government of Canada for this important investment in the future of our provincial early learning and childcare system. We look forward to continuing this important work with all of our partners in Manitoba's childcare community. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech. And now I would like to invite my friend Minister Carr to the podium to say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. I always know that it's good news when Minister Hussen gets off a plane and comes to Manitoba. And he does it often. I think maybe, Ahmed, that you have been here more often than you have been anywhere else. And when you come to Manitoba, you come with not only the goodwill of the Government of Canada, but investments. And in your case, those investments primarily have been in housing, the Rapid Housing Initiative, inner city housing for Winnipeggers and others in this province. It's always good news when you come here, and today is no exception. In fact, today may be the best news of all. And it's very good to see my friend Minister Squires again in person. We have not been seeing each other in person. As a matter of fact, Minister Hussen and I, who our cabinet colleagues have not actually been together in the same room in nearly 2 years. So an occasion such as this is a chance for us to see each other face to face to make such a positive announcement. And Scott Fielding, thank you for hosting us in your riding. It's good to be in this part of the city, and it's always good to see you. There is no better example of where social policy meets economic policy than in early learning and in childcare. We know how impactful this is going to be to literally tens of thousands of families in Manitoba, and how it's going to give an opportunity for women and men in families to be able to make choices that they would not have been able to make were it not for this announcement. And it's also as good an example as anyone will find of governments working together. And what we have learned during the pandemic is that Canadians want us to be working together. There are all kinds of reasons for governments to bicker and to squabble, but much more compelling is the reason to work together on behalf of the citizens that we all represent. And an example this morning is that to put all kinds of differences aside and to focus squarely on the interests of children and their parents and their communities in order to create economic opportunity that we could never even dream of. This is one of the most important social and economic policy announcements we will make. And we make it in a city and a province that has already demonstrated its commitment to childcare, as Manitoba is among the leading provinces in the country to understand that value. So I'm just so pleased to welcome my colleague, to reacquaint with my provincial colleagues on this great day. I don't know, Ahmed, whether or not you've brought rain. If so, I want you to stay all week because we need it in this part of the world, and to thank everybody for being part of this historic announcement. Indeed, this is a great day for Manitoba and a great day for Canada. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister Carr. Thank you for everything you do for Manitoba on a day-to-day basis. I also want to recognize Terry Duguid. Terry has been just a fantastic community partner and engaged in all things community in your area of town. And well, we're trailing each other around with a lot of these announcements, Terry, so we're seeing each other, so it's great news. I really want to thank Minister Hussen for all the work that you've done, as well as Minister Squires, putting this deal together. It's really, really important for Manitoba. At one point, I was the Minister for Social Services, and I can tell you this is really a transformative deal for Manitoba families. It's really important. You're going to have $10 a day on average daycare for individuals. There's building spaces, which is so important, and also bringing up the wage levels for ECE workers. Really important for Manitoba. I know from Kirkfield Park, and Kent is here, of course. Your actual office, I believe, is right here too. So knows how important it is from a Kirkfield Park perspective, but that's one community in Winnipeg. And so I just really want to thank the federal government for your partnership in terms of this, and Minister Squires for putting everything together. I do also want to recognize Krista Freeland, who reached out actually last week. Well, there were some discussions happening with all the ministers over the long weekend to make sure this deal came to fruition. So it's a great day for Manitobans. It's a great day for families. And again, we truly value the partnership we have with the federal government to make sure that we can provide a transformative system to childcare here in the province of Manitoba. So thank you very much. I would now like to introduce Kent Paterson, who is, of course, in charge, CEO of the YMCA-YWCA of Winnipeg, to say a few comments. So thanks, Kent.
Thank you, Scott. Minister Hussen, Minister Carr, Minister Squires, Mr. Fielding, and Secretary Duguid. I'd just like to say that on behalf of the Board of Directors and the entire staff team of the YMCA-YWCA of Winnipeg, how honored we are to have been asked to host this announcement today. It's an historic announcement. It supports so many things that are of importance to our organization and our community. For those of you who may not know, the YMCA is Canada's leading non-profit provider of high-quality early learning and childcare across the country, with more than 90,000 spaces in Canada. We have more than 30 centres located in and around Winnipeg, where we're honoured to care for more than 1,400 children each year, providing much-needed support to their families as they pursue careers and higher education. And I just want to say that we could not do what we do without our incredible team of early childhood educators, who have been essential at all times, but particularly so throughout this pandemic, as they work tirelessly and put themselves forward to help our community get through this pandemic. So my gratitude is huge to them. So we look forward here in Winnipeg, and as a YMCA-YWCA across the country, we look forward to playing a role in the expansion of affordable, accessible, inclusive, flexible, and sustainable childcare in Manitoba and across the country. Again, thank you all for being here today.
Yeah, thank you very much. That concludes the speaking portion of the event. We will be signing the agreement shortly, and then come back to take questions from the media. Merci beaucoup. I would characterize it more as the Government of Canada recognizing that each province and territory in Canada has its own unique circumstances and history in establishing its own early learning and childcare system. And if you look at all the agreements that we've signed so far, 6 agreements with the provinces, 1 agreement with the Yukon Territory. If you examine all those agreements, none of them are identical. And that's because each agreement takes into account the unique circumstances of that province or that territory. And the Manitoba agreement is no different in that sense. We took the same approach. We always said that we will negotiate in good faith, but at the same time listen to the insight and the expertise of the early childhood sector in that jurisdiction, and work very closely with our provincial and territorial counterparts. So I wouldn't say compromise, I would say more like recognition of the unique circumstances of Manitoba, and the agreement reflects that, as all the other agreements do as well.
Minister Hussen, Carol Sanders of the Free Press.
Hi.
Can you talk about the funding being primarily non-profit, for-profit? How much of the $2.3 billion is going to be allocated to for-profit versus non-profit?
We've always said that we are supporting all the regulated spaces. So those regulated spaces include public, nonprofit, and for-profit. What we've said is in the future, the growth should be in the nonprofit sector. But as it exists right now, we recognize that the for-profit sector for-profit providers are part of the system. They are integral to the system. They provide regulated care in many parts of Canada, and we recognize that for us to move forward, the for-profit sector has to be part of the solution in terms of providing high-quality early learning and childcare services to Manitobans and to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. So this funding will go to all the regulated spaces. As long as the space is provincially regulated, they're eligible to receive the funding.
Is there commitments then going forward? Like, do you want to see Manitoba invest more in for-profit or non-profit?
Well, obviously, the province of Manitoba is free to use its provincial resources the way they would like. But for the federal dollars, the growth has to be in the nonprofit sector moving forward. But currently, the funding is going to all regulated spaces, which obviously includes for-profit providers, but also includes nonprofit as well as public providers.
So if I understand correctly,
Yeah.
new centers that are for-profit won't be eligible for this funding?
What we've said, and again, Minister Squires also can also elaborate, is what we've said is the proportion of for-profit and nonprofit in this province has to, at the very least, stay the same moving forward. We have a strong preference, of course, for nonprofit growth, but we also recognize that the for-profit sector will always play a role in this space, and that is why we've said that federal dollars can go to all regulated spaces, which obviously includes the for-profit sector.
This is, I believe, the first Conservative government that has signed on.
PEI has a Conservative government, so I wouldn't agree with that statement. But we've signed an agreement with British Columbia, which happens to have an NDP government. We've signed with Liberal governments. We've signed with the Conservative government. So we've said that we will negotiate in good faith with all governments, and our focus is to make sure that we deliver $10 a day childcare for parents who are facing very high childcare fees. In some parts of Canada, you're looking at, in my own neighborhood, $65 a day per child for childcare. That's very high fees. And so if we cut those fees in half by the end of next year, that's more than $30 back in the pockets of families per child, right? So what we're trying to do is reduce those fees, create massively more spaces, improve the quality, and recruit and retain more early childhood educators. And we want to do that for every child in Canada, and every family has to benefit from this. But we can't do it alone. I've said that for us to succeed in this journey, we have to be joined by provinces and territories. And so with this agreement, we're covering almost 50% of all families in Canada. We need the other 50% to also have access to $10 a day childcare, fees cut in half by next year, accessible. So there's so many children on wait lists for an affordable childcare space in Canada. And we got to make sure that no child is left behind. To do that, we need the other provinces and territories to come on board. This is a great initiative by the Government of Canada. For many years, provinces and territories were saying, we need the federal government to step up in a big way, put a lot of money on the table, but also do it over the long term. We're doing this. This is $30 billion for 5 years, and Minister Squires, after the 5 years, we've already said we will continue to invest $9.2 billion every year after that. So this is permanent funding. And so we've done what provinces and territories were asking for so many years. We need them to join us so that we can say to every family in Canada that no child will be left behind.
Early childhood educators in Manitoba earn between, I think, $13 and $18 an hour on average. How is this going to affect what they earn and what they make, and how will you attract more people to the field?
So obviously, Minister Squires will provide more details there, but let me start by saying this is, training and pay and requirements of early childhood educators is generally not something that the federal government invests in. But even before Budget 2021, in December, through the Fall Economic Statement, we've put forward $420 million going to provinces and territories this year, just for early childhood educators, to recruit more, to retain them, to provide pay increases, and to provide incentives for people to join the sector, incentives such as tuition rebates and subsidies and so on. Why did we do that? We did that because we understand that early childhood educators are at the heart of this system. You can't create more spaces or have a better quality of early childhood service delivery without investing in early childhood education. So we've done that before Budget 2021. With this deal, we're providing even more support to Manitoba to support the early childhood educators. So I'll invite Minister Squires to talk about a little bit more detail in terms of the pay and so on. Sure. But yeah.
Thanks, Carol. That is a great question. And in addition to committing to building 23,000 spaces over the next 5 years, as well as getting an average of $10 a day childcare for all of our infant to 6-year-old spaces, we are committed to enhancing the wages. When I've traveled around the province and talked to early learning and childcare providers, the biggest challenge that they tell me they're facing is recruitment and retention. So we're going to set a floor for the salary of about $25 that will come into effect within the next fiscal year. And the other priority that we're moving on urgently is to enhance the subsidization for Manitoba families who are low income. So we're going to be nearly doubling the threshold and bringing about 6,000 new families into the subsidization by moving that threshold up to somewhere around 35,000 gross, or about 50,000 net for a household income to qualify for full subsidization. That will bring more Manitoba families in to receive that $2 a day daycare.
And you said $25 an hour floor?
Yes.
Okay, when does that kick in?
We're going to work very aggressively with our federal partners on that piece to ensure that we've got early learning and childhood educators coming into the system, knowing that they're valued and that they want to stay in the sector. So the Manitoba government committed $200 million to the early learning and childcare sector in Budget 21. We've brought in increased enhancements every year since we've been in government, and we'll continue to do that. Now that we've got a good partnership with the federal government, we can do more to address some of the challenges. And recruitment and retention has been one of the significant challenges here in Manitoba. And as a working parent, we know that there's no greater asset in our life than having a good, solid early learning and childhood educator, and we want them to feel valued and well paid.
So I do want to clarify, it is a $25 per hour floor.
For the EC2s coming into the system. We know that there are also childcare aides which have a different wage grid, and we want them to be coming into the system, more flexibility for them as well. One of the things that Bill 47 that we had passed in the legislature this last session was talking about that laddering for career entry into the early learning and childhood sector, and we're going to continue on that so that there are more options, more internships, and more flexibility. But ultimately, that recruitment and retention is a significant piece, and really grateful for the federal government's partnership that we can work together to addressing those wages.
But this will only be for those ECE2s coming into the market, not the existing ones?
We're going to set the floor for all ECE2s.
Okay, whether they've been in the business for 10 years or...
And we respect the autonomy of the local board governance, where each child care centre is particularly governed by a board, and they can set the parameters for their centre and to see the requirements for their workforce and meet those challenges. But we certainly want to see that wage grid applied as for the entry level or the salary point for the EC2s.
Minister Squires, I guess the Premier did say in regards to, the potential for this signing that he's hesitant to give a blank check to the feds on a pre-election pronouncement. That has changed today. What's changed on this?
So when I met with the Premier to talk about the multilateral child care agreement, he gave me a strong mandate to negotiate the best deal possible for Manitoba families, and that's what we've done.
What part of it, I guess, were you able to agree upon? Because I guess your federal counterpart said there were some compromises or rather, I guess, some differences between each agreement. What specifically is different about the Manitoba agreement?
One of the Made in Manitoba components is the flexibility on the age. We have 6-year-olds included in this agreement, which is something that I believe is unique. We have a later entry point, mandatory entry point for kindergarten, and that's why that flexibility was really important. We also have a lot of children in that area with a need to come into the system, and we really wanted 6-year-olds to be part of this. And thanks to the negotiation teams and partnership with the federal government, we were able to achieve that for Manitoba.
I don't know if Mr. Candidates or Mr. Fielding, but what is this going to mean in terms of economic value, in terms of having more people having daycare available that's affordable and accessible and quality? I mean, what is the economic deal?
Of course, it's innumerable value to the province of Manitoba. We know that right now there are a lot of people who aren't working because we have vacancies in our childcare sector, which I've said before has just almost never happened before. We want to get everybody back to work, and one of the strong factors is having a solid early learning and childhood sector, and that is what we're doing here to provide that opportunity. And there will be significant impacts that will be felt for years to come for the Manitoba workforce, and particularly women, getting women back to work and allowing women to flourish in their careers. And perhaps now I can offer Minister Fielding an opportunity to say a few words on that.
Yeah, I don't have too much further to say from what Rochelle had said. Obviously, making sure you have affordable childcare, and this is what this agreement's about. It's a great deal for Manitobans, great deal for families, and we really value the partnership with the federal government to get this done. I think this is a transformative deal for the economy. As we probably know, if you've got high levels and costs for childcare, it's a barrier to get into the work world. So we think it's a game changer in terms of getting the economy moving again, as well as providing affordable childcare for Manitobans.
So what's the payout for $2.3 billion? Like, what is this going to be worth?
It's 1.2 over 5 years, and so I believe it's 129 million will flow this year, 197 million dollars next year. So again, it's childcare obviously is a barrier to get into the work world for Manitobans, and we believe a strong plan a post-pandemic plan to get Manitobans back to work. We're seeing some benefits, as you saw with the labor force numbers last week. But we think this is an added benefit to getting Manitobans back in the workforce. So we're really excited to be partnering with the federal government on such an important initiative that's going to be transformative to Manitoba families.
For Minister Fielding, or rather, I guess Minister Squires, your caucus will meet in Brandon for the first time in weeks. A lot has happened. The Indigenous minister resigned. There have been comments critical of some of your colleagues' comments. Ultimately, is your caucus united? Do you support the Premier as leader?
Yeah, we're obviously having our caucus meetings. That's kind of a standard of practice that we normally have. throughout the session. I can tell you from all MLAs, and I know a lot of the ministers, Rochelle's been there as well as myself every day. And we've been working with the Premier every day, and we're going to continue to do as such. Caucus is an opportunity for us to come together and understand. It's also an opportunity for MLAs and elected officials to go to their communities and talk about what things are going right and what things are going wrong, and if there's ability to make some changes. And so obviously the pandemic is a big part of that, and we're seeing some good results right now with the vaccination levels. I think they're some of the top in the country, if I'm not mistaken, in fact, North America. So that's going to lead us away. So those are the types of discussions we'll have at our caucus retreat over the next 2 days on Tuesday and Wednesday in Brandon. Did you want to add anything?
You did a pretty good job.
Good stuff. Great job, you guys.
Good job.
Work. Congratulations.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah.
Well done, my
Great
friend.
deal.
We love it when you come to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.